guys, so today I'm going to do a video response to a video that was posted yesterday by a YouTuber that you probably know. Usually really like her content. I'm gonna address you if you're watching it as her for the sake of other people watching, even though it sounds a bit weird. Usually I really like her content. She's very eloquent, very well worded and very well informed when it comes to feminism. However, yesterday she posted a video about veganism, vegetarianism in relation to feminism, and I have to admit I was a bit disappointed with the video. I was really happy that she addressed the issue because I think it's something that most feminists online do not really talk about, even though it's a huge part of feminism in my opinion, and not only in my opinion. So it was a good thing, but I felt there were a few problematic points and a few things missing, and as much as she is much more informed when it comes to feminism than me, I feel like when it comes to veganism, vegetarianism, I've researched a lot more about it. I think I've dived deeper into the subject, so with all the good intentions in the world, I'm just going to address those problematic points and try to make the discussion a bit more interesting and I think hopefully a bit more accurate. First of all, I think the video could not really be completely efficient because the differences between vegetarianism and veganism in relationship to feminism were not explained in the video, which I think is such a big point. And the reason why I think is probably because she is a vegetarian and not a vegan. I was a vegetarian for 7 years before becoming vegan, so I have no harsh feelings toward vegetarians. It's not to attack them or offend them, and I know it's a controversial point. It's going to be not very appreciated by a few of you, but honestly, being a vegetarian doesn't really help. It doesn't really do much, and it's a bit absurd when you really think about it, because if you're a vegetarian, basically means you're against the meat industry. But if you still eat dairy, for example, you are contributing to the meat industry. By consuming dairy and eggs, you're still contributing to the meat industry, as I said, and also to the waste of many very important and precious resources, aka water and cereal. What's even more important in relationship with feminism is that you're deliberately consuming the byproducts of the exploitation of female animals and denying them the right to be free and the right to be with their family. That's also a bit of a sensitive issue, I think, in the feminist sort of world, whatever. But the notion of rape also comes in. I have no issues with saying that those animals are being raped, because that's really what it is. Obviously, in the dairy industry, the biggest victims are the females because they are raped, pregnant, they give birth, babies are stolen, and that starts all over again. And in the egg industry, it's also very problematic. In order to get eggs, we have completely disrupted the natural cycle of hens, and we also green male chickens because they're not useful to the industry. So not only is it cruel and unethical, it's also a mere reduction of these complex sentient beings to their genitals and their reproductive functions. To me, that sounds strangely and very sadly familiar, right? And now you could argue that this is different because those are animals and not human beings, even though we are animals. That attitude is called speciesism, and it's just as bad as racism, honestly. A while back, we used to say the exact same thing about women. We didn't have souls or the same intellectual capacities as men, about people of color, about women of color especially. And as much as white feminism is a real issue, as much as transphobia is a real issue in the feminism, in the feminist community, speciesism just is, because you cannot pretend that you're against oppression, yet claim it's fine for other beings to be oppressed for the only reason that they are different. Some people will argue also that it's about culture. Once again, it's really easy. You just have to replace animals with human beings. Cultures are not here to oppress and harm, and they're not here to legitimize the oppression and the harm of other beings either. You don't accept excision as a valid and justifiable part of a culture. Why would you accept the murder of someone else as such? Speciesism. Cultures are not and have never been a good reason to hurt, harm, exploit, rape, and kill. If you start accepting it for animals because they're different species, yet they can feel pain like we do, they have feelings like we do, they have cultures like we do, complex social structures like we do, but have different languages, different skins, different shapes, different colors. How can you be credible when you fight racism, transphobia, or any sort of, hatred for strangers? I think it's also important to get a little bit historical here. People may be under the impression that the association of veganism, vegetarianism with feminism is a fairly recent thing, just like veganism is a recent thing when it's been around forever, really. Yeah, it's really not. It's really not recent. Throughout history, feminism and veganism or vegetarianism have always been linked, and many great figures of the movement have written, talked, given lectures and conferences about veganism, in favor of veganism. Those women, even when incarcerated, maintained a vegetarian diet, for example. In the 19th century, feminists held meetings in vegetarian restaurants, published vegetarian cookbooks, and a great woman I have to mention is Anna Kingsford. She was a doctor, a writer, and a very passionate vegetarian. And that was only in the 19th century and only in the UK. So if you think worldwide and if you think of the 20th century and the 21st century, you have many, many, many more vegetarian, vegans, feminists, thinkers, philosophers, writers who wrote and talked about these topics in a very eloquent way. So how can feminists nowadays ignore those facts and the obvious relationship between feminism and veganism that has always existed and not in a small portion? The notion of intersectionality, it's funny though, I think how it's mostly used to criticize or discourage people from becoming vegan instead of encouraging it, which to me really makes no sense at all. The very, I think, inaccurate and misinformed idea that veganism is a privilege unfortunately still exists. It's not true. Access to food is a privilege. Access to healthy food is a privilege. In the world, many people do not have access to food and many people do not have access to water either. But if you look at it a bit more carefully, a bit more closely, who is the guilty one? Animal industry, simply. With a waste of resources that's so insane it's actually hard to believe. So first things first, if you're so concerned with the fact that access to food is a privilege, maybe you should look at what's in your plate in order to realize how it's affecting the rest of the world. Because animal industries pollute, destroy and kill, pollute the environment, destroy lands, destroy forests, and kill human beings who either live there or need those lands, need those plants and everything that's in there to survive. Those human beings are way more vulnerable than us in our Western countries. And while in those countries all people are victims, women are always more vulnerable than men. Women are often tied to their homes, their family, their children. They may not have access to jobs, so money. They may not have access to education. And if their area or the group in which they live becomes poorer, they will be even more endangered. They might also not have the same chances to flee and search for ideal life conditions somewhere else. So veganism is helping, and actually not being a vegan is really detrimental to other women in the world, and not only women, obviously. Now in our Western world, or at least in the States or North America, there seems to exist what's called food deserts. That's a very unfortunate thing. However, I highly doubt it's the situation of most people watching this video. And I think when you're addressing a certain group of people and when you're addressing a serious issue, you need to be really careful when you talk about those points that could be excuses as to why you should not do that, or you are excused to not do that. Because otherwise just give people who are lazy or quick to turn a blind eye to those awful things a good reason to just keep doing nothing. In food deserts, people have low to no access to healthy food, which means they already have a very poor diet. To think, however, that keeping animal products in their diet will help them in any way is just being very misinformed when it comes to nutrition, because animal products are actually the most unhealthy things you could put in your body. Think hormones, pus, cholesterol, fat. They are really acidic, so they create a lot of issues with calcium, for example. They cause cancer, diabetes, heart conditions, obesity, and there's nothing that's in vegetables and fruits, aka the healthy foods that you cannot get in food deserts, that you find in meat and animal products. So getting rid of the animal products would not worsen the condition of these people. If they increase their intake of carbs, cereals and whatnot in order to get enough calories. Now, of course, that's not ideal, but that in fact would be better than eating crab aka the dairy, the animal products of all sorts. So the food desert argument is really, really a flawed one. Also, I'd like to come back on culture real quick to suggest that for some groups of people, culture is linked with cruelty, and that getting rid of this cruelty, aka improving and evolving, would be too hard, isn't a very feminist position in my opinion. And it's not a respectful statement either. I think it's really underestimating the capacity of these people to evolve, change, and maintain and preserve their culture while still being ethical. While I understand that it might be more difficult because those cultures are already looked down on or discriminated against, it does not mean that they have to stick to what we think and what we accept as morally wrong or unethical because they can't do any better. And I would like, as a last but not least point, remind people that no matter how hard some human beings have it, it does not compare to what animals go through. In her book, The Sexual Politics of Meat, Carol G. Adams uses the term absent reference, which applies to both women and animals that are most often excluded from male narratives or completely denied the right to have their own. The reason why it is important to talk about veganism, and the reason why it's important to be militant about it, and the reason why it's important to not be scared to talk about it and educate people and convince people, is because, unlike women, animals are completely unable to be heard and speak up. They rely entirely on us. While women, people of color, trans people, queer people have a voice that can be heard and just need allies to give them visibility, animals need people to carry their voice, to speak about the cruelty and exploitation they're facing every single day. That is why we talk about veganism. As long as you value the little struggles of a human being more than the life of another sentient being, you cannot be in the truth. And you cannot really talk from a place of humility and equality. You are still an oppressor, but just an oppressor that makes exceptions. And that's not what we want to aim at as people, as feminists, as vegans, as, just as people. So I think that's all I have to say. I mean, if I want to keep it short, I hope this was interesting and I hope I did not offend anyone. Also, please keep in mind that English is not my mother tongue, so, I would love to get your suggestions, guys. If you have any books about feminism and veganism, I will put some links in the description box below. And yeah, bye!